out there. I'm Joe Hero to discuss with you Missing Time Chapter 9, entitled Speculations, Both Grim and Hopeful. Indeed, speculations, grim, hopeful. Bud Hopkins reflects upon the evidence available regarding UFOs and alien abductions in Chapter 9 of his book Missing Time. He points out that, on the surface, it would appear that alien abductions are extraterrestrials kidnapping victims to acquire information, sometimes about our species. This theory is quite flimsy when trying to stand up to a test of logic, since the evidence points to a more elaborate study of humans involving genetic research over the lifetime of a vast number of subjects, and it involves more complex sampling of blood, tissue, ovum, sperm, and perhaps even brain tissue. This alien agenda quite possibly also has extended to chemical manipulation, introduction, or control via probes and/or implants. Bud put forth another explanation that may be even more plausible. Maybe these aliens want something from us, although it could be that they are much more advanced than us and have a lofty purpose beyond our comprehension. Why do they bother with little children? Why not take or talk to world leaders? Perhaps they are taking something that we have and they need, like a raw material such as DNA structures. A November 8, 1975 incident in the Catskill Forest Preserve is a strong evidence for this gathering of material idea. Ted Blecker and Bud investigated that case where two young men were camping when they were awakened by a noise outside their tent. When they investigated, they found a silvery craft. The beam from their flashlight revealed a robot-like figure, and then many more, which seemed to be paralyzed by the beam from their flashlight. A sort of psychological siege ensued, with the boys held up behind overturned picnic tables with hatchets and a built-up fire. The beings would advance as close as 15 feet from the boys. They were terrified and eventually made a break for the car, which died, though it was in top mechanical condition. It would seem that the boys were abducted at that time, with about an hour of missing time unaccounted for in their evening. About a week later, one man noticed a sore by his navel, followed by a second and third sore. Within a month, large straight welt lines converging toward his groin appeared with no medical explanation that could be uncovered, except that the lines and sores suggested a hollow needle was inserted in. Later the sites became inflamed and maybe even infected. The other man was marked as well, though he suffered 2 diagonal cuts near the base of his spine. Betty Andreessen was told by her abductors that the reason for her naval penetration had something to do with creation, but that some parts were missing. She had had a hysterectomy. Carl Higdon, in a 1974 abduction, was scanned behind a sort of screen for several minutes, only to be returned to his vehicle because he was not what his captors needed. He was, in fact, sterile, having had a vasectomy. In attempting to stick mostly to case facts rather than speculation, Bud had noticed that the quasi-medical examinations and procedures remained central to almost all abduction cases, whereas extended telepathic conversations, often involving environmental themes, appear to be only peripheral, possibly even as distractions from the aliens' real agenda. Bud surmised that even though the U.S. Air Force may have more evidence like photographs of UFOs than the average person, he doubted that any high officials knew any more about their purposes than you or I. He then gave a brief overview of the apparent sequence of escalation of UFO activity, starting with what seemed to be surveillance of our cities in the 1896 through 1897 wave of sightings, to the second wave in the 1940s, where hundreds of sightings by pilots on both sides, including many small discs following inches off the wingtips or cabs of aircraft, occurred. aircraft technology seemed to be the new interest to these aliens, and by 1950 the full-blown abduction phenomenon had begun. This progression of events does point to a plausible genetic observation and experimentation program. Bud then told the story of his friend Mary, an artist and mother of 3 who had an interest in the UFO topic. After Bud had discussed some case materials with some folks leisurely, she had called him because she wanted to discuss some memories that had emerged after the discussion. In the exact same years as Virginia Horton, under similar circumstances as Virginia's deer, Mary had a teaching voice talk to her extensively, and she chased and caught what seemed to be a beautiful hummingbird, but upon bringing her prize to the house to proudly display it to the family, she discovered the jar that she had used to catch it was empty, and she was left with an incision on the back of her leg bleeding profusely, just like Virginia Horton. And, just like Virginia, she was shown color-coded star maps during the incident. The question of why the seemingly post-hypnotically induced amnesia is employed when our own hypnotic techniques can counter their effects is still a mystery. Though the Pascagoula abduction of Charles Hickson and Kelvin Parker in 1973 demonstrated that no amnesia was induced at all, the abductees retained full recollection of the incident, with the exception of Parker during the time during which he had fainted. With so much data attained and given the information, Bud speculated that maybe their induced amnesia works better than what we seem to give it credit for. What if hundreds of reported abductions, way back in 1979 no less, are only a tiny fraction of what lay buried beneath the subconscious memory of thousands of individuals? It's something that we should sit and ponder, and I'd like you to sit and think about that yourself. I'm Joe Hero. Everyone be safe out there until next time, when we'll wrap up Missing Time with the Chapter 10.